This video is about how to use the AdaCAD interface for version 3. So this is a new version that we've just pushed the code for today. So what you're seeing here is the main interface. Think of this like a tabletop where you would have lots of pieces of paper. So the first way that you can start drafting or creating weaving files would simply to be making a blank rectangle. So here we've started our first canvas, you can say, and if we open it, we get more control over the individual draft pixels. So you can, do this randomly or do this strategically. If you want to do it strategically, you can select sections. You can fill them with different pre-existing patterns. You could select again, do things like flip the pattern. One of the things that I think is helpful here is you can even add rows or remove columns and rows as you need. That way you can get something exactly the size you need. The other tools we have here are tools that let you set all the heddles down, up, or all the heddles down. Or if you want to actually just specify that a certain area is made with a certain material, you can sort of color in that material region. Then, when you go to flip this around, it'll give you a rough simulation of what this will look like when it's actually woven. Okay, so that's the basic functionality of creating a new draft. Another way that you can create drafts is just by kind of creating different elements on the screen. So let's say I want 2 filled circles. I'm gonna maybe put them together like so. It merges them, gives me a new circle. Maybe I want to just play with this motif a little bit. Okay, so I've made something a little bit wild here, some kind of graphic. This is where things start to get maybe a little bit more interesting. Let's say I've made this graphic and I really like it, but now I want to weave this. So as you might see, it's just a black and white graphic. It's not technically a very good weavable structure because it would just be a whole lot of long floats. And we can actually confirm that by going in here and looking at the yarns. Actually, that does look kind of interesting. Maybe we could play with this, but my hunch is because it has all these long floats, it's not going to hold a very nice structure. So what we can do is actually use this as a template for filling. So this is where we get into our operations. The operations let us take small units in AdaCAD and perform very specific actions on them. So let's say we're going to fill this pattern, which we connect by clicking them together, with 2 different stitches. Let's say we want to do a twill, and let's say we also want to do a basket weave. So I say fill, then I say basket weave, and then twill. So it'll always fill the black regions with the first stitch and the white regions with the second stitch, and any gray region it sees as being unset. So this is like if you wanted to weave this actual shape, you would pick up the yarns at the boundaries of this shape. But for the most part, this is just going to be a white area if you're having to weave in a rectangular kind of machine. Okay, so now that we've added those 2 stitches, we can start playing around with them. So let's say we want to make our basket stitch a little bit different. Or we want our twill to be a little more blocky, or perhaps a little more sparse, so we want it to appear a little bit lighter. We can go ahead and do that by changing the parameters here. So that's where I think this starts to get really fun, is because you can start just playing around with the different kind of stitches you get. So let's say I have my twill here. I'm going to make it friends with a basket weave, and I want them all to fit into rectangles that are 20 by 20. I can also go here and just copy this operation. I get the same parameters, and I'll connect this into my basket weave. So now these are the same size. Let's maybe make this one a little bit more sparse, or if you want to play a little bit more dynamically, oops, you can move this little slider on down. Now we're seeing it's getting filled in a little bit more. Okay, well this is kind of fun. Let's see what fun things happen when we combine them in interesting ways. So one of the ways we can combine them is we can overlay them. So we can overlay the first pattern on the second pattern. That's kind of interesting. Let's maybe play with our original swatches here and see how it changes. Okay, so that's how you basically go about creating new, I don't know, discovering new stitches and being a little bit more playful with it. If you ever have a question about what an operation does, if you hover over the operations, it tells you a little bit more. Or you can open this question mark and it tells you a little bit more. So it overlays two drafts together, tells you how many inputs it can take, tells you what the other parameters are about. And if you're interested in the geeky code stuff, you can also see the code there. All right, so let me show you some of the other features. So let's say instead we don't want to overlay this. We actually want to create a layered fabric. And we want this on the top layer and this on the bottom layer. It'll automatically compute the draft so that these print or weave on two different layers. And then when you're doing layered drafts, maybe you actually want to have a bit more fun with the materials. Like maybe you would want the top layer to be one color and the bottom layer to be a second color. This actions feature here just allows us to create sort of repeating patterns that we populate all along for the materials. And let's say I want a white warp. I can go ahead and do that. So now when I go to my yarn view, I can see a little bit more of the structure. I can also do things like look at the back of the fabric. Because this is a two-layer fabric, this isn't how it's going to look when it's woven. We're really going to see a top layer and a bottom layer pretty distinctly. So one of the ways we can simulate that is by marking every other row as being a different kind of unit, or a different, what I call a weft system. So you can also do that in here. I'm going to just say, okay, just alternate my weft systems, A, B, A, B, A, B. When we go back into the draft view, we can actually hide system A. So this is what the back will look like. Or we hide system B, and it shows us what the front of our fabric would look like. So that's one way you can think about multi-layered fabrics. And again, you have these zoom features here if you want to zoom in or zoom out.